we cannot breathe. We need to make it clear that our right to clean air is not negotiable. So the following is something that we must understand. One, this is toxic air. This is bad for our health. Two, that the sources of pollution do not change in winter. What changes is the weather. When winter comes, the cold air settles. There is no wind. There is moisture in the air, which traps the air pollutants, the particulates, closer to where we breathe. The sources of pollution remain the same. And thirdly, GRAP, the Graded Response Action Plan, cannot be a proxy for action. The fact is, when GRAP was brought in, and I'm very much responsible for bringing in GRAP, asking the Supreme Court to legislate it, it was done as an emergency action. It was an alert system. The idea was that if pollution levels are very high, we bring in GRAP phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 stages, so that you can immediately bring down pollution. But the idea also was that if you have to close schools, if you have to stop trucks from coming in, ban construction, this will inconvenience people. And so we will act through the year so that we can bring down pollution and we don't have to impose GRAP. And fourthly, let's be very clear, the time for charades is over. Cloud seeding, composters, all this has to stop. We need our right to clean air. I'm Sunita Narain, and in this episode, I want to bring to you what is it that we need to do. I want to set the agenda once again in the hope that we will get serious, that we will act. Because if we do not act, be very clear, next winter, pollution will only be worse. So what are the sources? Let's be very clear. All studies, and sadly, the studies are a bit outdated because government has not asked for new studies to be done. But take it in any way, understand it from other parts of the world, the sources of pollution more or less remain the same. In Delhi and its neighboring area, in order of priority, they are as follows. Vehicles, burning of dirty fuel in industry, burning of garbage, and the fuel that we use in households, largely poor people using in chulas, in stoves, which is biomass and firewood. There are other reasons as well, but the three key reasons are vehicles, industry, and waste. Let's get our action plan clear on these three. And as I say this, I also want to make it clear that dust, which is all that we seem to care about through all the sprinkling efforts and all the efforts to have smog guns around, is not a pollutant per se. Dust is only a pollutant because it gets coated with the combustion from the fuels, the emissions from combustion sources. But what we really need to worry about is the small particulates, the gases like NOx, which then end up as secondary pollutants or particulates, the small fine particulates that go through our nose, enter our bloodstream, damage our lungs. I keep saying this, and I'll repeat it once more to you, that, when God made our noses, He put in hair in it as a way for us not to inhale dust. But today, we have fine particulates, what are called respirable, tiny particulates, PM 2.5, even smaller now. And these are what we need to make sure that we can reduce, we can stop. And the sources for that, once again, are the burning of fuel. So let's get this real and straight, because only then can we make an agenda which is effective to move ahead. So why winter? And this is where, yes, there is a particular role of, say, stubble burning, which is the burning of paddy straw by farmers in Punjab, Haryana, and even UP, or Diwali crackers. It adds. Let's not make light of this. It definitely adds to the crisis and the challenge of air pollution in that particular month of October and November when winter comes in. And this is clear from the data which gets put out by what is called a decision-making support system of the Ministry of Earth Sciences. So what they do is to look at what is real-time pollution, what are the sources of it. Now, if you compare this data, you will find that in the week when paddy burning happens and the winds bring it across from Punjab and Haryana to Delhi, then the contribution of that pollution to the overall pollution of Delhi can go up to 25%. But still, the bulk of the pollution remains of Delhi's own sources, of which vehicles are key. And in the week after, when the paddy burning has come down and the impact of Diwali is over, then you will see that it is Delhi, which is the key source, contributor to the pollution, its own sources, the surrounding areas, and within that, vehicles again top the list. So that's really what data shows us and helps us to understand what we must do. So we need to be able to deal with the long-term, year-long sources, and we need to have solutions for the paddy burning, which is an episodal pollution, which tips us over. That's the science of air pollution. There is another part of the pollution story, which is NOx. Now, NOx is a gas which gets emitted largely from vehicles, but when it's in the air, it becomes a secondary particulate. And that's what then adds to the problem of pollution in our cities. Now, if you look at this, and the reason I'm bringing this up is that this is so directly connected to the congestion also on our roads. And if the data that we put together regularly shows us that the more the congestion on the roads, the more the pollution, particularly more and higher the NOx pollution. So again, I want to tell you, we know the sources, we are just not acting at the scale and speed that is needed. We need to stress the fact that we need an agenda to move ahead. If we don't act, we will not be able to contain pollution. I keep repeating this, I know, but please forgive me because I am really as anguished as all of you to say we need to turn the Delhi pollution story around. Enough is enough. Vehicles are the key source of contributor to pollution. But let's also understand that a lot has been done, and that action has led to a reduction in the air quality and an improvement in air quality. Not enough, but it does show us that if you act, you will see improvement. One, we have introduced in this country at tremendous cost clean fuel. When we started working in the area of pollution in the mid-90s, we had diesel with 10,000 ppm of sulfur. Today, we are down to 10 ppm of sulfur. We have cleaned up the fuel. If you clean up the fuel, the vehicle will emit that much less. We have simultaneously cleaned up the technology of vehicles. So we have moved from BS1, Bharat Stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we have leaped forward to 6. And if you take BS6 for the most grossly polluting vehicle, which is trucks, the reduction in pollution is down by 90% almost over BS4. So these are cleaner vehicles. The question and the problem is that we are not scrapping or replacing the old with the new. And that's what I will come to in terms of the agenda. But we have also brought in a congestion tax into Delhi. We know that a number of trucks used to bypass Delhi, used to traverse Delhi, go through Delhi at night. And as a result of it, would add to pollution at night. Today, we have two bypasses, the Eastern Peripheral Expressway and the Western Peripheral Expressway. We have a congestion charge at the entry so that trucks which are polluting have to pay a tax. This is to disincentivize them from using Delhi to come through. They will take the bypass, and it is happening. Then, very early on, the big transition, the leapfrog in Delhi was that our taxi, our bus, and our auto rickshaws moved to CNG. And we know that CNG, a gas, natural gas compressed, has much less particulates than diesel. So we have made gains, we have acted, but now we need the next generation reform. That was the second generation work that was done. It brought us some benefits, but a lot more needs to be done. What? Let me spell that out to you. So when we look at the next generation reform, first let us understand what do we mean by the pollution from vehicles? Because this is sort of, it's an esoteric question. I'll break it down. It's a simple sum. What is the emission factor of the vehicle when it was produced? What is the age of the vehicle? Because there is a deterioration factor as well. You multiply this by the number of kilometers that vehicle moves on a daily basis, and then you multiply it by the number of vehicles. That gives you the sum of pollution from that vehicle. It also tells you which category of vehicle is the most polluting and what is it that you need to do. So if you look at kilometers traveled, buses, public buses, private buses do between 200 to 250 kilometers a day. High. Taxis can go up to 300 kilometers a day. So those then become big sources of pollution just by the number of kilometers they travel. And of course, if they are older vehicles, if their emission standards were lower when they were introduced, or because they're older and because they're commercial vehicles, they have just deteriorated over age. And that's understandable. The other category is cars, two-wheelers. Now, even though our cities have a higher and higher sprawl, overall, we don't, on an average, do more than 30 to 40 kilometers a day in private cars or a two-wheeler. There, the problem is the sheer numbers. So if you look at car registration just in Delhi, we are registering 500 new cars a day. We are registering 1,500 new two-wheelers a day. So the sheer numbers, you can improve the fuel, you can improve the technology of the vehicles, but if you just have so many more on the road, all that improvement gets negated. And then the third category is really your commercial vehicles, but really the big gross polluting commercial vehicles. The trucks and many of the other commercial vehicles that you have, the goods carriers, only because their emission standards were already so bad that they are today gross polluters. So I'm giving you this because this has to be the agenda moving ahead. So agenda 1, when it comes to commercial vehicles, the trucks, the tempos, even the taxis, the autos, we need a targeted time-bound strategy to replace these. We need a fleet replacement, not a namby-pamby approach to say, I'll bring in a few electric buses, a few electric taxis. We need a time-bound fleet replacement approach. The reason is very simple, that these vehicles travel long distances on a daily basis. They add to pollution. They have high deterioration because of the commercial use of these vehicles. This is why we need a targeted agenda for them. But just think, if we had, as we did when we brought in CNG in the early 2000s, we also replaced all the diesel auto rickshaws and replaced them with CNG. We had a huge advantage of clean air. But the program was done to incentivize the switch over, because these are poor vehicle owners. You can't dictate to them that they must go and buy a new vehicle. You need an incentive scheme. You need to make sure that the scrappage of those vehicles actually happens. And the big advantage of that is that if you actually scrap those vehicles and you get that scrap iron, it goes into making of new iron and steel and brings down the emissions of those industries. So you could come up with a package, as was done in the early 2000s when diesel autos and diesel buses were replaced. You need to come up with it, but it needs to be time-bound. Again, I would stress, and it needs to be done fast. Agenda number 2, personal vehicles. This is something I discuss with you again and again. The agenda is to move people, not cars. And for this, we know we need an augmented public transport system. We need the last mile connectivity. We need to plan not just for new electric buses, but we need to make sure that the ridership in these buses goes up. And once we have done this, we can certainly have restraints on the use of cars through higher parking charges. But today it's a chicken and egg issue. You can't tell me not to take my car out when there is no public transport system of the scale and the convenience, and it needs to be modern and it needs to be safe. We need to do this. This is a long-term agenda, but it can be done. Other cities in the world have done so. Why can't we? The agenda number 3 is we need clean fuel for industry. Now, every time you will ask about this, you will be told there are hardly any industries in Delhi or in the region around you. That's a misnomer. The fact is, there are industries. We have tracked them. We have mapped them. They are using dirty fuel. They are not working in the authorized areas, but in the unauthorized areas. It is difficult for pollution regulators to find them and to make sure that they are checked and monitored. We have to change this. And the answer to this is really simple. We need natural gas to flood this region, but we need to make sure that gas is at a rate which is competitive with coal. Today, if you look at the tax regime of natural gas, LNG, which is liquefied natural gas, by the time it is brought in and shipped and then made into compressed natural gas, has a tax component between 30 to 50%. So the game changer agenda is bring natural gas under the GST. Make sure you have incentivized industry across this region to switch from every polluting fuel to use gas. This is a game-changing agenda. It can be done. It can happen as of tomorrow. Agenda 4 is really the big question of farmers. And, you know, we know that farmers burn paddy not because they want to, but because they have no option. The time window between when they harvest the paddy and they have to grow their wheat, that is it decreasing. And with climate change, we know the kind of burden on farmers to be able to sow and harvest. So we need to make sure that we incentivize their use of paddy straw. Again, the government policy actually provides for this. The technology exists and there are many options. We can bale the paddy straw and then transport it and take it to plants which will then use it to produce gas, natural gas, or ethanol. We can use the paddy straw to be able to till it back into the soil so that you can harvest the carbon, and that way you can even get carbon credits for it. So we know it. It's part of the plan. But we are not making sure that we implement it at the scale that is needed. We are not doing this with the kind of determination that is needed so that it happens and it happens at scale. Agenda 5 is your and my agenda. We have to segregate the waste at the household level. We have to ensure that our municipalities take that segregated waste, and we must make sure that we can take the wet waste and compost it, if we can, in our own neighborhood, so that it is not transported, it is not mixed, and then it is not burnt. This agenda, again, is in writing. The government policy dictates it, but we are not doing it. So again, my appeal is, we don't need a new policy, we don't need a new law. We just need to make sure that what is written on paper gets implemented. So agenda 6 is really enforce, enforce, enforce. When it comes to brick kilns, for instance, there is a clear direction that brick kilns in this region have to move to zigzag technology, which will reduce pollution. When it comes to thermal power plants, we know that standards have been set to reduce the amount of particulates, NOx and SOx from the thermal power plants in this region. We cannot keep delaying these deadlines. We have to enforce, enforce. When it comes to the construction sector, we know that dust control measures have to be brought in. When it comes to stone crushers, we have to enforce the dust control measures. Pollution control has to be part of our DNA. Again, no new agenda, enforce, enforce. My last agenda is act and act at scale. It's been done before. In 2001, when we had to move to compressed natural gas, within a year, 100,000 vehicles moved to gas. We built the entire infrastructure of CNG in the city. So that scale made a difference, the speed made a difference, and you saw clean air benefits. You can't do this at the way we are implementing today, a little here, a little there. No cute solutions are going to work. We need this drastic, and we need it to be implemented. So I keep getting asked, what did Beijing do? What did China do? How did they reduce their pollution? After all, remember, before the Olympic Games, there was all this talk about smog days in Beijing. Today, they have blue sky days. How? Two things. One, they brought in gas, natural gas. They replaced all their coal with gas. They closed down factories that were small, which were inefficient, if they could not convert to gas. So the change of fuel at scale was what Beijing did. And two, they had a massive fleet replacement exercise. Now, they have done battery vehicles even for personal vehicles and at scale. I am suggesting that in Delhi, we need to target this. A few more personal vehicles running electric vehicles is not going to clean up Delhi's air. We need large-scale fleet replacement, which is targeted, which is why the electric vehicle agenda for us has to be the buses, the autos, the taxis, and with a time-bound approach. That is really also what Beijing did. But the bottom line of all this, and I'm really hoping I'm not with you to say the same thing again next winter, is that we need to make sure that we take this pollution as a public health emergency. We act at the scale that is needed, and we act with speed. We have the institutions. We have the court monitoring this. We have governments. We also have a plan. What we don't have is a clear target to reduce pollution and priority actions that will make sure this happens. We cannot live and breathe this air. I hope you share my despair and make sure that we can work together to change this for the future of our children. Thank you.